level.
I haven't even commented on this the whole time. I don't tweet or anything like that, but I'll tell you this: if Lane Kiffin is tuning in to right now, I remember a specific loss. We lost to Kentucky. Kentucky at home.
Mm-hmm.
Ole Miss doesn't really give Lane too much flack. Matter of fact, I think he tweeted something like 2 weeks later, like go, whatever, like goofy, whatever. Point being was he does the interview and he's just like, man, Stoops got me, and then we go on to the next thing. That's not the case with LSU.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm getting to. I would like to move to the other thing with the bowl season and all that dying. That's the other thing that adds to kind of like the tension.
Yeah.
Because let's say you do go to a good bowl game, like, we got into the Sugar Bowl and then we lost, right? That doesn't mean anything anymore.
Yeah.
Especially when you got teams like Notre Dame saying, we're not participating in any of this. So how do you feel for bowl games moving forward? Like, do you think these things are going to get erased sooner or later? Like, what's the point?
Well, it kind of depends on the future of the college football playoff format and what they decide there.
Yeah.
It's 12 teams right now, and the move from 4 to 12 teams has impacted the bowls pretty drastically. And there's good, there's sort of good examples of that. Like the Citrus Bowl was forever this bowl game that included usually 2 top 10 teams. It was usually the Big Ten's first or second team or the SEC's first or second team, right? Whoever's wasn't playing in the 4-team playoff or the BCS championship would go to the Citrus Bowl. And this year they had like the 4th best Big Ten team and the 5th best SEC team.
Facts.
So that is obviously like that. Those things are an example of where the bowls are, and if you go beyond 12. Which eventually I think they're going to get to 16. Whether that happens next year, I don't know, but they're going to eventually get there. So it's going to impact the bowls even more negatively, and adversely. And so I don't, if you look at bowl viewership, it's pretty high, right? It's like, and a lot of that is because people are at home. And they're off in December, the holidays, and they like to watch football the last 3 weeks of December, and that's there's what they do. So there are windows there, but those windows could be eventually, with a big enough playoff, be reserved for playoff games. You could see that happening at some point. So it is. We've had, I think there's been like 2 or 3 bowls in the last 2 or 3 years that have shut down, right? I would guess that you're going to probably see more of that. You're certainly not going to see any more bowls added. Like that doesn't seem to be something that's going to happen. But I think the bowl's future depends on kind of the playoff format and what it looks like.
I hear you on that one. Let's wrap this thing with my favorite coach of all time, Nick Saban. That's where I want to end it. I know y'all are trying to get y'all's lunch. I'm not going to hold y'all anymore. I want to talk to you about your opinions on Nick Saban in this era. And do you think there was a future where he could actually compete in this, or do you think he kind of read the writing on the wall? And I don't want you to slander the king, but was there a time where you're like, man, this is not good for Nick Saban at all? Actually, like this is not where, like you said, with the Georgia guy who goes to Mizzou starts.
Yeah,
I think that would have really been tough for Nick Saban to address, being like, hey, I got to go pay.
Yeah,
like pretty much Lane Kiffin right now. I got to go pay all for the depth now. I mean, who has a QB room that's what is it? What's the final figure on that, actually, for Lane Kiffin's new QB room?
Oh, the money? Oh,
you saw that, huh?
I don't know. I mean, it's probably pretty high. Yeah, I mean, because Sam Levitt alone was, I'm sure, at least $5 million, So, Nick, the example I use with Georgia is a good example of what Nick used to do at Alabama. And he used to stockpile the best players, especially on the defensive front. And maybe they weren't all playing. They were getting developed and waiting their turn, and it just doesn't happen anymore. Players move around, and they want to play, and they want to play immediately. And so it's not as much of a sort of developmental as it used to be. So, and I think Nick's been pretty public about why he retired, and it was because of the changes happening. I mean, he's said that part of the issues drove him sort of out of the sport. I think I had somebody recently tell me that if Nick were still around, he probably would have had more losses the last 3 or 4 years than he had the previous 10.
I completely agree.
And part of that is just the parity of everything sort of leveling off in college football. You can't stockpile and develop and all that as you used to do. But there's a story after the Rose Bowl and they lost to Michigan in the semifinal 3 years ago of him returning to work like a couple days later. And I don't know if he said this publicly, but he said enough to make me think that it's true, is that, dozen or so players came in the office and basically were like, I need more money or I'm leaving, and I think that just finally he's like, I'm just not going to deal with this, right? And a lot of older coaches have sort of done the same thing. They don't want to, for one, they just don't want to deal with the changes in general. They don't agree with the changes. And number two, it's going to impact their win-loss record, the changes. So I think for both of those reasons, he hung it up. And to the benefit of TV viewers, because he's great on TV.
He's phenomenal.
He's really, really good. Yeah.
Which sucks because that actually makes you miss him more because he's like, man, just to see him on a field somewhere would be, honestly thinking back to when you and I are talking about GM roles, right? That would be a guy who I'd be like, specifically like an Ole Miss or like a LSU, like, hey, man, we want to bring Nick Saban in, not as a coach, but you're going to be running our personnel. Because he just had it with talent, man.
Yeah.
He found some guys that I was just like, how? Like, how, And he had a quote the other day where he talked about how recruiting now, you're going to have to really go in on your recruiting and how you evaluate players. Damian Harris was a 5-star. And he said that. He said Damian Harris was a 5-star. And then he said Brandon Jacobs was like a 3-star. We found Brandon Jacobs. Brandon Jacobs is still doing his thing in the NFL right now.
Yeah.
So I thought that was one of those things where I'm like, I look at Lane Kiffin, I see all the money, I see the flash, I see everything, but it's like, still at the end of the day, you got to be the Kurt Signetti who's like, no, we're really dialed in on how we bring in our talent and seeing them gel as a team and what we're doing here.
Yeah, it's very important. Culture and all that, and coaching is still wins games.
But listen, I want to thank you so much for joining me. Like I said, I wanted to keep this brief so that I can just get some opinions that I needed some clarity on. The last thing was about, basically all the rules and regulations, but we're still figuring that out as we go. So I feel like there's not really too much that you would even know about where this whole thing going at all,
Unpredictable. Every day there's something new.
Seriously, man. So. I found one last thing, quote for what it was saying that, and you might have opinions on this, 30 to now 40% of kids who end up entering the transfer portal go without a team.
Yeah.
They lose everything.
Yeah, I think the number I saw from Max Olson, the ESPN reporter, stays on top of the portal stuff a lot more than I do, and I think it was around 25 or 30% had not found a home as of a couple of days ago, as of the portal closing. So, in some of those cases, the players will probably go back to the original school, but many of them won't be allowed to. Basically, they won't, and they'll be having to go maybe even FCS, or in some cases, and this happened with an LSU receiver. This is old. This is 5 or 6 years old of a story, but he got in the portal, and a year later, he was a UPS driver in New Orleans because there was no spot. You
go from playing in Death Valley at 7 p.m. at night. It
was a receiver, and I can't remember. I can't remember his name, but I used him as an example of what could happen. And I talked to him, and I think his parents, and that was about 4 or 5 years ago, maybe that happened. Yeah.
Oh, don't be shocked when you start getting more of these stories. Where, then you got to put the cap on. Of should I morally be putting this out there? What coaches are going to hit me up to strip this? And I imagine your job, as you were saying earlier, is about to get real tough, man. But at the same time, I'm always going to be following. Yep. I know my entire group chats. I'm glad you brought your dad. I'm getting a photo with you before you leave.
Yeah.
So I want fuzz on you. But like I said, thank you so much for coming in. And if you ever are back in Miami, I know this is a one-off because the national championship game. Glad you had a good time with the family. But definitely come back on the show.
Yeah, we'll do.